From Microbe TV, this is Beyond the Noise, episode 103, recorded on April 13th, 2026. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and joining me today is your host, Dr. Paul Offit.
Hi, Vincent.
How's it being back in Philadelphia? It's all good?
No, it's great. Yeah, that's where I belong.
This is the video version of Paul's column on Substack called Beyond the Noise, cutting to the chase on important health topics. Today we're going to talk about Paul's latest column, RFK Jr.'s latest disservice to children with autism. So Paul, tell us, how does RFK Jr. demean children with autism?
Well, he has said, for all to hear, that children with autism won't ever pay taxes. They won't ever play baseball. They won't ever have a job or fall in love.
These are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date.
Which isn't true. I mean, there many children with autism do have jobs, can throw and catch a ball, do pay taxes. There's a TV show called Love on the Spectrum. He should see it because what it is, it's a reality show where people with autism, young adults with autism, meet each other and fall in love. So that's just not true. And I think what he does by saying that is I think he really in some ways demeans or catastrophizes this disorder, and it's not fair.
So why is he doing that? I mean, what's the purpose? I mean, we know he is searching supposedly for the cause, but why is he demeaning in the meantime? It doesn't make any sense.
I think by catastrophizing it, he says, this is awful. We have to do something about it. And he's the white knight who's going to do something about it. He's the one who really cares about these children, so he's going to do something.
I see. Well, over the years, he has proposed many causes for autism. Tell us some of those, Paul.
Well, so first that the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine causes autism, or that thimerosal, an ethyl mercury-containing preservative that was in vaccines for children up until the early 2000s, caused autism. And he wrote a book about that called Thimerosal, Let the Science Speak, where the science really didn't get to speak at all because, like our data showing that MMR vaccine doesn't cause autism, there's many studies now that show that thimerosal and vaccines also didn't cause neurodevelopmental delays. And he has said the hepatitis B vaccine causes autism. And he has said that that when he actually became head of HHS, Health and Human Services, in February 2025, he announced that in April, that in 5 months from April, he was going to use all the resources at NIH, all the resources at CDC to show what the real cause of autism was.
We've launched a massive testing and research effort that's going to involve hundreds of scientists from around the world. By September, we will know what has caused the autism epidemic.
Ignoring all those other things that he said had caused autism but didn't. And then in September, with a major press conference in front of the media with President Donald Trump there, he had Trump stand up and say, Tylenol given early in pregnancy, that's what causes autism. And the women need to stop giving Tylenol, tough it out, and then they won't be blamed if their child has autism and they took Tylenol.
Effective immediately, the FDA will be notifying physicians that the use of let's see how we say that. Acetaminophen. Is that okay? Which is basically commonly known as Tylenol, during pregnancy can be associated with a very increased risk of autism. So taking Tylenol is not good.
And now, more recently, aluminum adjuvants in vaccines cause neurodevelopmental delays when, in fact, an excellent study in Denmark showed that wasn't true. So it just goes from one thing to the next without apology.
It should be telling in itself that he just tries one thing, it's wrong, and then he moves on, right?
Right, and he says a disorder like autism, which affects as many as 1 in 32, can't be genetic because there's no such thing as a genetic epidemic. And first of all, there's a question about whether it's an epidemic at all. I mean, there are advances in things like diagnostic tools, recognition. We've broadened the definition to include a larger spectrum. That's really probably accounts for most of it. And really, if you look at the evidence, and groups like the Autism Science Foundation, if you look on their website, they go through this in detail. Probably 80% of autism is genetic when you look at sort of twin studies and studies of relatives. So he's wrong. I think it is largely a genetic component. And there are other things associated with autism, like there are certainly maternal drugs taken during pregnancy, like valproic acid, which is an anti-seizure drug, infections during pregnancy, like rubella, maternal health, and then most interestingly, so the microbiome of the child may determine whether or not the child is at risk for autism. So there's a lot of interesting leads, none of which he talks about.
And so when he's proven wrong, does he admit it and make a conference and say, I was wrong about this, I'm sorry?
No, and that's what's so frustrating in this. I mean, if you're a parent of a child with autism, you look to this man and his famous name and his important position as Secretary of Health and Human Services, and you trust him, you believe him, and certainly the number of women, for example, who were pregnant and saw what that press conference about Tylenol, stopped taking it, and I think it's just, and so therefore they experienced pain they didn't need to experience because they were in no way helping themselves or no way decreasing the chance of the child would have autism. So he misleads them and never apologizes for misleading them.
Do we know if parents of autistic children in general look to him for help, or do they realize he's a charlatan?
I think some definitely look to him for help. For I mean, he's the white knight, right? He's gonna speak truth to power. He's gonna have he's not going to be opaque. He's going to have a era of radical transparency. He's going to tell the truths. He's going to expose these taboo subjects. This is the way he advertises what is about to be his new podcast.
I'm going to ask the questions and lift the taboos and expose the hypocrisy and the conflicts and the corruption.
Oh my gosh, I heard that. Has he released one yet? Do you know?
I haven't seen them yet, but I'm sure I will.
Do you plan to listen to them?
Yeah, probably. Just only so that we can have that as fodder for future Substacks.
I don't know if I could listen to him for a half hour telling lies. That's the problem. But you can do it, and we can talk about it. All right, now the latest claim, September 2025, is that Leucovorin would help children with autism. Please explain that.
So leucovorin is vitamin B9 or folic acid, and certainly folic acid is important for brain cell health. I mean, women are encouraged, obviously, to take folic acid during their pregnancies to reduce the incidence of spina bifida, which is a nervous system disorder. And so his argument was that there was a study that was done, I think, in the European Journal of Pediatrics, showing that leucovorin may be of benefit in reducing the symptoms of children with autism. Now, that paper has subsequently been withdrawn by the journal because of methodological flaws. But he says this works, and it was actually part of that press conference, that Tylenol press conference. And Marty McCary, who's the commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration, also got up and said this can benefit as many as 20%, 30%, 50% of children with autism, because the thinking was that this paper was meaningful.
And the idea here is that the folic acid receptor in the brain is blocked by some antibody response. It might be 20, 40, 50% of kids with autism. And leucovorin will bypass that blocked receptor. And that's why so many doctors are probably seeing so much clinical improvement on kids with leucovorin.
What's interesting is that you do need folate in your brain. And there are children who have this genetic defect where the gene that codes for a protein that allows for transport of folate into this cell is disordered. So, but it's an extremely rare disorder, maybe 1 in a million children. So therefore it's not going to affect most children who have autism, which is occurring in 1 in 32 children. So for that, I think leucovorin would clearly be of value, but that's an extremely rare disorder.
So where did McCary get this 20, 40, 50%? I mean, that's a ridiculously wide range, right? Where did you get that from?
I think he sort of made it up. I think there's the confused things here is that people can have antibodies directed against the folic acid receptor, which can occur in people who do or don't have autism. And so I think and that's more common. But this defect of the folic acid transport, sort of cerebral folate, transporter protein, is extremely rare, and that's where it would matter.
So the paper that you, aside from that one paper which was retracted, is there any other science supporting the use of leucovorin for autistic children?
And all the people who weigh in on this, like the American Psychiatric Association or the Autism Science Foundation or American Academy of Pediatrics, have all not recommended giving leucovorin, which, if it helped, if clearly there were data or evidence that it helped, of course they would do that. But they deserve, these children with autism deserve the best evidence. And so there isn't that evidence, and therefore it's not recommended.
And it sounds like there won't be a clinical trial because they're very expensive and no one feels it's worth doing, right?
There might be. I mean, there might be a better trial. I hope that's the case. I mean, children certainly deserve the best evidence, but for right now, it's not a recommended product, even though initially that had been heartily recommended during that press conference. But the FDA really backed away from that later, I think in March, after the September press conference or whatever, 6 months later or so, they backed away and just made it clear that this would benefit likely only a small percentage of children, given the rarity of this particular genetic defect.
So don't you think, though, that some physicians, having heard this, will still attempt to prescribe this to some kids?
Sure. I mean, this sort of thing always induces people to take advantage of that. And so there are no doubt doctors that are prescribing this, and some of them will charge for an initial visit as much as $1,500. And so again, it sort of takes advantage of, I think, these parents' desperate desire to do something, anything for their child. It's an emotionally burdensome disorder. It's a financially burdensome disorder. And I think these parents can be easy prey. And there are some, physicians who would take advantage of that, sadly.
So another autism cure of RFK Jr. is wrong. I presume he hasn't said anything about it since the press conference, right?
Not a peep.
So he's done like a half a dozen different things. I mean, if you just look at that at face value, that's absurd, right?
It is. I think he uses these children with autism to as a prop in some ways. I RFK Jr. really care about these children. This is a catastrophic disease. I care. I'm going to do something. And so he then puts out this medicine, which probably will do nothing. We certainly are waiting for better trials. And I think he's an opportunist in that sense. He's an interloper in that sense. I mean, I don't think he really understands this disorder at all.
You would think that if he truly cared, he would make sure he knew what he was talking about before he offered all these interventions, but he doesn't.
No, he doesn't.
You called him an opportunist and an interloper. So I think for a head of HHS, that's horrible. But let's take it apart a little bit. Why would he be an opportunist?
I think this is what he does. I mean, he's arguing that we have more chronic diseases than ever before, arguing that autism is one of those chronic diseases. I'm going to save you. I'm going to save you by reducing the incidence of that disease, by eliminating vaccines, because that's what he believes. He believes that vaccines have only decreased infectious disease at the cost of causing chronic diseases. He has been a warrior on that path for 20 years, and this is all part of that. And I think he uses these children and in some ways abuses these children by giving false leads and false hope. This is who he is.
Well, as you very well know, Paul, there are other chronic diseases besides autism. And perhaps RFK Jr. should read the literature, because recently we have seen vaccines demonstrating to reduce the risk of dementia, heart disease, long COVID, cancer. Those are all chronic diseases, aren't they, Paul?
Yes, that's exactly right. I mean, HPV vaccine, the human papillomavirus vaccine, reduces a common cause of head, neck, anal, and genital cancers, which are 30,000 cases a year. The hepatitis B vaccine reduces a known cause of liver cancer. Right, of course.
So if I were if I were on a Senate committee questioning you, Paul, I said, Dr. Offit, wouldn't you agree that these papers suggest that vaccines actually prevent some chronic diseases?
Yes, and I would say yes. I'd like him to be asked that question.
Of course, Casey Means would say it's complex, right?
Right.
This is a very complex issue.
And not answer the question. All right, we will put a link to this column in the show notes. That's Beyond the Noise with Dr. Paul Offit. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Vincent.